Hey YouTube, it's Think Museums and we're here in San Francisco. We are driving over the Oakland Bridge as we head to catch a ferry to the Alcatraz Prison. We're going to enjoy the vibes here in San Francisco and check out some cool stuff. But today, we're going to check out this high maximum prison that is renowned as a historical site here in the West Coast, Alcatraz Prison. If you're planning to visit Alcatraz, here are the basics. So when you want to purchase tickets, it's highly recommended to purchase in advance. The sole concessionary for these cruises coming to the island are called the Alcatraz City Cruises, LLC. And of course, weather in Alcatraz is quite unpredictable. It's liable to change unexpectedly. Always bring in layers and wear comfortable closed-toed shoes for walking, guys. Well, eating and smoking is restricted here in Alcatraz or near the dock in order to protect the sensitive seabird populations. Consuming food or tobacco product is prohibited in all other areas of the island. Food is not sold on the island nor on Alcatraz Cruises vessels. So there's 100 of these canoes. Oh, it's pretty heavy too. Yeah. And the sole road is protected San Francisco Bay. And you can imagine 100 of these. And they'll shoot like 440-pound cannonballs 3 miles. So that's how it was. Very powerful. What else are we going to look at it? So this is our first stop. We're going to go all the way inside there and see other places too. Hey YouTube, we're in this beautiful island of Alcatraz. A little history. In 1969, a group of Native American activists called the Indians of all tribes arrived on Alcatraz. They spoke out against the US government's termination policy and the broader plight of Native Americans. Golden Gate National Recreation Area commemorates this moment in history with 19 months of special events and exhibition. It's called the Red Power on Alcatraz, Perspectives 50 years later. So this is some interesting stuff going on in this island. So 2019 marked the 50th anniversary of the occupation of Alcatraz by the Indians of all tribes, a key event in the history of Alcatraz Island. Well, this is the first day the prisoners get here and they have to strip down and get into the shower. Only 3 people have ever escaped Alcatraz. Here's how. Imagine you have committed a crime and are now locked away in Alcatraz, the nation's most secure prison. How will you spend your time? Will you write letters to your family and friends, or will you plot your eventual escape? Unfortunately, the odds will be stacked against you for the last option. Only one group has managed to successfully break out of Alcatraz in its 30-year history. Out of 36 men who attempted to escape, 23 were caught, 6 were shot and killed, and the others drowned. But 3 men, brothers John and Clarence Anglin and Frank Morris, might have pulled off one of the greatest prison escapes in American history. The 3 prisoners planned their big break for several months, setting up a secret workshop where they built the tools they needed to escape. Then, on June 11, 1962, they put their plan into action. That night, John, Clarence, and Frank stuffed their beds with papier-mâché heads and squeezed through their cell vents, crawling up the pipes to the prison roof. From there, they slid down a smokestack to the ground and launched their homemade draft, made of more than 50 stolen raincoats, into the Pacific Ocean. Not once did the prison security system detect them. You got to give it to them, they broke the system. Here's the catch though, no one knows what happened to the escapees. When pieces of the raft and paddles washed up near the island, many assumed that the men were dead. Alcatraz officials have suggested they drowned or died of hypothermia. But now, more than 50 years later, the Anglin family has provided evidence that the men might have survived. For starters, Clarence and John Anglin's mother received Christmas cards signed with their names for 3 years following the prison break. The family also released a photo of the brothers that might have been taken in the 1970s, 20 years later after the escape. What's more, John Anglin allegedly wrote to the San Francisco police in 2013. While all 3 prisoners survived the escape, he was the only one still living. However, FBI officials doubt the letter is real. A handwriting analysis of the letter came back inconclusive. It looks like the escapee's fate will remain the stuff of legend for now. So, what was life inside Alcatraz? Daily life on Alcatraz was harsh, and prisoners were given only 4 rights: medical attention, shelter, food and clothing. Recreational activities and family visits had to be earned through hard work. Each cell in B and C block was 5 feet by 9 feet. Cells at Alcatraz had a small sink with cold running water, small sleeping cot, and a toilet. Most men could extend their arms and touch each wall within their cell. The cells in D block, however, were more spacious, but still the least popular. In D block, inmates were confined to their cells 24 hours per day, with the exception of 1 visit per week to the recreation yard, and these visits were alone. There were 336 cells in B and C block. National Park Services state that there were originally 348, but 12 were removed when stairways were installed at the end of each cell block. There were 36 segregation cells and 6 solitary confinement cells, actually known as confinement chambers by many inmates, in D block. 2 cells on the end of C blocks were used as restrooms for the guard staff. The cells in A block were only used a few times for short-term lock periods when an inmate did not require full solitary confinement seclusion but needed to be fully isolated from other inmates. Inmates were granted 1 visit per month, and each visitation had to be approved directly by the warden. No physical contact was allowed, and rules dictated that inmates were not allowed to discuss current events or any matters concerning prison life. Inmates talked with visitors via intercom, and a correctional officer monitored the conversation, doing each the majority of the time. Inappropriate conduct during visit will result in a loss of visiting and or other privileges. At any given time, there were about 300 civilians living on Alcatraz that included both women and children. The primary living areas for families were building number 64, 3 apartment buildings, 1 large duplex, and 4 large wooden houses for senior officers. Families enjoyed their own bowling alley,
small convenience store, and soda fountain shop for the younger island residents. The warden lived in a large house adjacent to the cell house and actually used inmates with good conduct records for cleaning and cooking. The highest number ever recorded of prisoners at Alcatraz at any given time was 302, and the lowest number was 222. The average number of inmates during the 29 years of service was around 260. There were approximately 1,545 total men imprisoned here, and over 30 convicts were returned to Alcatraz with different numbers issued.
So guys, there is a fascinating history of Alcatraz Island. You know, Alcatraz has many layered history. It was a Civil War fortress, it was a military prison, it's a federal prison, it's a bird sanctuary, it's the first lighthouse on the West Coast, and the birthplace of the American Indian Red Power movement. These are just a few of the fascinating stories of the Rock. Alcatraz Island is a designated National Historic Landmark for its significant contribution to the nation's history. Alcatraz reveals stories of American incarceration, justice, and our common humanity. This small island was once a fort, a military prison. In 1969, the Indians of all tribes occupied Alcatraz for 19 months in the name of freedom and the Native American civil rights. More than 2.3 million people are behind bars in the United States. Looking at the entire history of the island, most prisoners held on Alcatraz were in fact U.S. military personnel. Notable exceptions include Southern sympathizers or supporters during the Civil War, objectors during the World War I, and a number of Native Americans, beginning in 1873. On June 5th that year, the first Indian prisoner arrived, that is, in 1873, when Robert Simmons, an African-American man from Savannah, Georgia, was brought to the foggy, windswept island of Alcatraz in the winter of 1918. He was thrown into the hole, a pitch-dark dungeon cell with slimy walls crawling with rats. He was held there for 14 days. His crime? Simon was an objector who opposed war and refused to fight on the battlefield of World War I. Another interesting story about this other guy, whose name was Robert Lipscomb. He was an African-American federal inmate and he was labeled as a race agitator and also a non-homo. He fought and organized for civil rights within the prison walls during the segregated 1950s.